practices, we're talking about taking that research that's out there and starting to apply it to our agencies, to our individual divisions. So we're making better choices based on research. And it's changing some of the things that we've done before, really based on that research. So we're going to be talking about a couple examples here today. One will be COMPASS, that's our Department of Corrections authorized risk and need assessment. We're also going to be talking about the Law Enforcement Proxy, which is a screener for risk. And we'll be talking about the pre-charge diversion, and then we'll also be talking about some of the evidence-based practices that corrections does, as well as treatment court in one of those models. So this is really all based on the National Institutes of Corrections, so they're a division of the Federal Department of Justice. And the EBDM is really a nationwide initiative, and state of Wisconsin is one of the 3 states that has been selected to move forward. So we're part of a state initiative and really a federal initiative as well. So the research tells us who to target, when to target, what to target, and how to target. So we know a lot of the information. It's just starting to actually apply that to our practices. Some definitions to get out of the way. Risk, we're talking about risk to reoffend, so the likelihood that somebody is going to commit another crime in general. And when we're talking about actuarial risk, similar to an insurance company, how they're going to determine what you're going to pay based on your age and your driving record. That is similar how risk is determined. There's static risk factors and there's dynamic risk factors. But we know that if a 16-year-old is driving, probably a little more riskier than a 50-year-old man driving on the streets. So we know that just age is an indicator of risk, and we also know that the number of times that you've been in the system is an indicator that you didn't learn from that experience. So that's just another indicator of risk. So there's some quick screeners that we can do, and Commander Shorts will be talking about the Law Enforcement Proxy to really get at those risks. But when we want to get at the needs, so those are the drivers of criminal behavior. What is driving someone to commit crimes? Judge Peterson alluded to addiction and substance abuse. We know that's one of the drivers out there. But there's a lot of other drivers of criminal behavior, so we're going to talk more about that. Responsivity is really tailoring the treatment and the intervention to the individual. If somebody has a mental health issue, that's something that we have to be able to respond to if they're going to really get the most out of the intervention that's put in place. If somebody has a low reading ability, we want to make sure we're mindful of that when we're looking at different programs for them. And just gender is another one of those responsivity issues. We know that male and female have different gender issues, so that's one thing that we want to be taking into account as well. Fidelity is something that you'll hear us toss around quite a bit, and it's really just the adherence to the model or the principles. So we're delivering the interventions as they were intended to be delivered, and that's how we're going to maximize the effect and reduce the recidivism. So standards of research, so all research isn't created equal. We know that there's dirt out there, so that's the research that's proven that, boy, things are hurting people. We don't want to be doing them. And it goes all the way up to the top, that gold standard, where there's random controlled trials, and there's the full scientific, really, experiment in doing the research. So a lot of the research in the criminal justice field, we're focused on that silver and gold research overall. And there's a lot of what they call meta-analysis, and those are studies of studies. And that's really what's driving a lot of our discussion today on evidence-based principles. So we're going to talk about what are those research findings and how can that inform our decisions in the system so we can really be focused on reducing recidivism. And you can talk to any folks in our jail. They don't quite have the banner out there, but they do see a lot of the same folks come in through their doors. So the first is really to assess the risk to reoffend. That is the primary really principle with a lot of the evidence-based practices. We need to identify the risk level. We have professional judgment. You can, we use our judgment all the time in every capacity. But when we're talking about risk to reoffend, we need to be digging a little bit deeper. So it's not quite what meets the eye. So we want to be doing risk assessments overall. And we really want to be focused on that medium to high risk. Those are the ones that are going to be more likely to reoffend, unless there's some sort of intervention put in place that changes the behavior. Dosage is an important concept. The higher risk you are, it's just the more dosage you need of behavior-changing programs in order to really have to reduce that risk level. We want to be limiting our services for low risk. So this is the population that research is saying they tend to self-correct. They come into our system, they made a mistake, they generally have a natural kind of rational response, and they're not going to do it again. They have their brush with law, and they self-correct. By and large, that's what happens with low risk. So those are the individuals that we want to either just adjudicate traditionally to move them through the system quickly, or we actually want to be doing diversionary programs for low risk. So we'll be talking more about the pre-charge diversion program with our district attorney's office. Again, we want to target that medium to high risk. Judge Peterson used the bang for the buck. As you can see on this bell curve, it's that higher risk and this extreme high risk. Those are the ones that are danger to our public safety. They're a danger to themselves a lot of times. That's where we really want to be focusing our limited resources and programming to really work on that group of individuals. And it does have to be at the appropriate dosage. We want to be using validated risk assessment tools. This is an example of Compass. So this is what the Wisconsin Department of Corrections has available to counties, including Dunn County. It's a product from North Point. As you can see, the red bars on the top are the risk. They give us a general recidivism risk, a pretrial risk, and a violent risk. So we get 3 different measures there. The green bars denote the criminogenic needs scales. So the more green on the bar chart there, just the higher need that an individual has. And those needs, risk and need, are very different situations. We could have somebody that's low risk and high need. There's a lot of folks like that. Those are individuals that are better suited for services outside of the criminal justice system. If we start bringing those folks into services, we tend to make them worse because they're going to be associating with higher risk individuals. So really, it's those we want to have that medium to high risk. And then we also want to see that there's a need for services. We don't want to just put people in a class or a therapy program just because it's available. It has to be really individualized and meaningful to them. And we'll talk more about these criminogenic needs. So there's a number of those drivers out there that are really focused on identifying what are the criminogenic needs. We want to be using the risk assessment tools to identify them. We want to be training staff to know what the Compass is, how to read it, and what to do with the information. As a county, we want to have the full range of programs available to actually service these criminogenic needs available in our community. We know if services can be delivered in the community, they're going to be more effective for an individual than if they were delivered in a prison or in a jail setting. We want to be focused on addressing the top 3 criminogenic needs. The more criminogenic needs we address, we're going to be lowering their risk to reoffend. So we want to be not just focusing on one thing. We want to be focused in at least the top 3 drivers. And we want to be matching those services to the need. Again, that's that dosage and the appropriate risk for the different groups. So criminogenic needs. So they're commonly lumped into a big 4 and a lesser 4. We got 8 of them. As you can see, the big 4 in the dark blue is really focused on antisocial thoughts, thinkings, behaviors. There's also the big 4, the lack of family support or lack of family accountability. To a lesser extent, but still drivers of criminal behavior. There's the substance abuse, there's lack of employment, lack of success in education, and lack of pro-social leisure or recreation activities. So again, it's almost the idle hands is the devil's workshop. So these are the factors that if somebody presents to us high need on these areas, they're likely to reoffend unless there's some sort of intervention put in place. Judge Peterson talked about every opportunity is an opportunity for harm reduction. And we want to keep that in mind, especially when we're talking about the antisocial thoughts and tendencies. Are we reinforcing those antisocial thoughts, or are we starting to challenge them and maybe give them a different perspective of what a judge is like or what a jail worker is like? Again, we want to be focused on those behavior changing programs in the community. So cognitive behavior programs are, by and large, what stands out in the research as being effective, and that's where people are learning that connection between their thoughts and their emotions and their behavior, and starting to learn new ways to deal with those thoughts and those behaviors. We want to do skill building opportunities for individuals to many times it's not rehabilitate, we're trying to habilitate people. Maybe they grew up in a home where they weren't exposed to parents that had steady jobs and went to work and learned how to manage a schedule and all the things that we just take for granted, a lot of us can take for granted. So the cognitive behavioral therapies are really focused on skill development and starting to identify new thoughts, new behaviors, so they can deal with stress and situations in a different way than they have in the past. So a little joke here, I went to a very special school. You had to be sent there by a judge. Whenever we can integrate our treatment services with case processing, we're going to have better effect. So this is a way that we can really capitalize on the emergency or the crisis situation when somebody's arrested, and really use that as a motivator for change overall. So really, what is working out there? So I want to talk a little bit about the link between treatment and recidivism. So sanctions alone, that could be jail time or prison. We know that based on meta-analysis, so these are the studies of studies, there's 30 studies of studies that say sanctions alone increase recidivism. So if we're going to be sending someone to jail or prison, we shouldn't expect them to change their behavior. Their behavior can actually become worse for a lot of different factors. Inappropriate treatment. So all treatment isn't created equal. It needs to be evidence-based treatment that is provided. So inappropriate treatment also can drive up recidivism rates 6%. Intensive supervision, probation without treatment, we're again increasing the recidivism. But if we get the appropriate treatment, that's where we can see that 30% reduction in recidivism. And it's really identifying what is an appropriate treatment for somebody. We know we want to be targeting those criminogenic needs. We know we want to be focused on the high to medium risk. We want to be matching the right intervention and the right dosage. We want to be using that cognitive behavioral approach. We want to be using positive reinforcements. And there's things that we don't want to be doing. We don't want to be doing one-size-fits-all treatment. We've got this created, this program, this class, everybody goes through it. That's inappropriate treatment. Knowing that all individuals with drug histories or drug charges don't necessarily need drug treatment. We know that women, there's gender issues, especially if there's a history of trauma, and that holds true for men. There's a lot of folks in our system that we work with every day that have had traumatic events, both male and female. We know that anxiety disorders make it difficult for somebody to be in a group, and we need to be mindful of that. And then we also need to be mindful of any limitations or disabilities that individuals have so they can really take advantage of the full treatment that's made available to them. So we want to be using more carrots and stick to motivate. So we've got the little joke there of motivation. There's a big paddle and stick. That's kind of the old school or the old way of doing it. You know, you better or else, you know. But we need to start changing our behavior, how we interact with individuals. And it's using that carrot approach. So it's really trying to motivate people for change towards something versus away from something. Judge mentioned the 4-to-1 ratio. That's what research is showing, that if you've got that 4-to-1 positive versus negative, you're going to have the most impact. The more praise or the more positive reinforcement that you do, it doesn't necessarily mean it gets better. It actually starts to take a negative effect. But that reinforcement can be, good job, you showed up today. You know, for some of the folks, just showing up where they need to be is an achievement. So we need to be recognizing these things. Swift, certain, and proportional sanctions. This is an example where we see, Charisse will be talking a little bit about Department of Corrections evidence-based response to violations, and Janae will be talking about treatment court. Those are examples where we really try to use that swift, certain, and proportional response to sanctions. We're trying to extinguish that behavior. So here's a joke. It's great. We've got looks like some pirates on a ship, and we got one out on the plank. It's greatly reduced the rate of recidivism. So we want to not only do things that are effective, that's probably pretty effective at recidivism, but we need to do things that are proportional and appropriate as well. We want to be enhancing offender motivation for change. So a lot of the folks that we see are here because of interaction with law enforcement. They're usually not excited about change or doing things a little bit differently. So one of the evidence-based practices is more of a technique, is to use motivational interviewing. It's really trying to enhance your interpersonal relationships with people and really help them opt for change versus status quo. Change is a lot harder than just doing what you've always done. So we want to be recognizing that, and we want to also be recognizing that every one of us represents the government. You know, we work for the government. So again, our behavior and our interactions with everybody helps people come to conclusions about us and government. So we want to be, really promoting positive role models. We want to be reducing those antisocial thoughts and tendencies. We want to be enhancing offender motivation. So it says, I tried to turn my life around, and apparently I made an illegal U-turn. We need to recognize that change isn't just an instantaneous thing, it's a process. So it takes sometimes it takes quite a bit of tries to make that change possible. So why should Dunn County be focused on evidence-based practices and evidence-based decision-making? If we really are serious about increasing public safety, reducing recidivism, it's our obligation to really change how we're doing our jobs. There's just too much research out there. There's just too much body of evidence to say that we should be doing things a little bit differently. So we've got more than one tool in our toolbox. Incarceration is important. It's necessary. So we're not advocating that goes away. It's just that we have other options if we really want to be focused on reducing crime. This slide here just shows just an illustration the incarceration population, the explosion in this country. So we know that counties collectively spend about $70 billion a year on jails, and that's a lot of money for brick and mortar. So we need to, we're forced to really think about things a little bit differently. So again, there's more effective ways for us to do business. We learned about a number of these research-based practices or evidence-based practices, and we can expect better results for Dunn County. We can expect, maybe not that 30% reduction, but any kind of reduction would be a win for us. So it's really less crime, fewer victims, restored families. Families are, home again. We've got people working instead of, in jail or in prison. And then the cost benefit, not only in staff time and efficiency, but also just the tax to our system that everybody here I know is sensitive to. And again, I appreciate your time today, because to even carve out 2 hours for training is a hard thing to do. So we know you're busy, and we just want you to consider a different way to kind of consider our approach to the criminal justice system. So again, this is the tip of the iceberg. We're going to have additional trainings in the future. If you have questions, please jot them down on your cards, and we'll collect them at the end of our training. And let's go ahead. We'll have Jim say a couple words before break.
All right. Yeah, that's right. We're going to give you a break in about 10 minutes. A couple things that I wanted to throw out here that I think are very important. And number one is, not everybody's going to agree. In fact, when we did our run-through on this, we came up with something, Sharice and Sarah, where we actually had a dispute as to what the research showed about something in particular. But going and down the road, what we're hoping is that we can have a culture where if you disagree, somebody disagrees, let's talk it out. Let's sit down and let's get the research, and let's talk about the principles, and let's try to come up with a consensus going forward about the use of certain programs and so forth. And I think what we'll do is have Commander Swartz come up and talk about the law enforcement proxy. And Commander Swartz is here on behalf of Chief Atkinson, and so many of you know Todd Swartz. I'll just turn it over to him. Thank you.
Again, my name is Todd Swartz. I'm here to present on the law enforcement proxy for Dunn County. And the question becomes, what exactly is a law enforcement proxy? This is a first cut assessment tool that's designed to aid in officer discretion when handling a criminal matter. It also identifies offender risk levels, and it's broken down into three different categories, and that's the low risk, medium risk, and high risk. And it gives officers the ability to divert offenders into the diversion program, which allows the low risk offenders an opportunity to be able to self-correct, a better chance to self-correct. There are several benefits to having a law enforcement proxy, and these are 5 of the main categories, or 5 of the main benefits. By adopting the use of the proxy instrument, law enforcement has a cost-effective tool for pre-screening offenders. Low-risk offenders can be effectively identified and channeled to minimum supervision.